Recently, I came across a small rant by a person who says that they're part of the agricultural industry. They were venting about programs which claim to save ugly produce from being thrown out, and saying that they don't really do that much at all. Now, as someone who has an Imperfect food subscription and cares a ton about the environment, my reaction was something along the lines of, "No! It can't be!" But once I got over that initial shock, I realized that I needed to dig down into her comments and see if I could find factual evidence which either supported or refuted her claims. Hi, I'm Nathan, someone who likes eating food but doesn't want to live underwater, and this is Save Money, Save the Planet. Here are some of the main points which stuck out to me. Number 1. Most ugly produce gets turned into soups, sauces, salsa, jam, ice cream, etc. Number 2. Food lost due to labor issues and rotting prior to harvest is worse than food lost due to the supply chain. And number 3. Finally, ugly produce is more likely to end up in a grocery store in a poor neighborhood than to be thrown away. Now, I better make a quick note here before we go much farther. In this video, I'm referencing Imperfect foods a lot simply because I'm most familiar with them. But this really applies to all services which work in a similar manner. You got that? Alright, then let's go. I'm going to go out of order here and address point number 2 first. Oh, I'm sorry. Does that make you angry? Then show me how angry you are. Scroll down, hit the like button. Yeah, that'll show me. Anyways, this point jives with what I've heard through other sources. For instance, I'm currently reading the book There Is No Planet B, which has a large section dedicated to food waste, and the author notes that in America and Europe, the 2 largest places that we waste food is in harvesting and not consuming everything that we purchase. So, everything checks out here. Let's move on to point number 3. Honestly, it doesn't take any huge stretch of the imagination to believe that grocery chains are sending the more beautiful produce to the richer grocery stores, and ugly stuff goes to the poorer ones. You know, let's just assume that she's right about this one and move on. So, now we're at the most interesting point. Ugly produce gets turned into soups, sauces, jam, ice cream, etc. Now for me personally, this point absolutely passes the sniff test. My normal job is in manufacturing, and I can absolutely attest to how tight companies like to keep those purse strings. Just throwing something away is almost always a last resort, and companies are always desperate to just eke out as much value as possible from every product, regardless of if it's a defect or not. For instance, at an old job, I used to keep scrap parts simply for the purpose of training new employees or running engineering tests. Sure, it didn't get me full sales value out of that part, but it did prevent me from having to use sellable parts for those same purposes. But let's talk about a food-centric version of this. Have you ever heard about the craziness that happened with cranberries in 1959? Well, buckle up, because here we go. Back in 1959, cranberries were a food that Americans only ate once a year at Thanksgiving. In this particular year, trace amounts of toxic materials were found in cranberries. This led to an official announcement being made just weeks before the holiday, which of course led to sales absolutely plummeting. Cranberry companies were desperate to figure out a way to make money from the crop which they had already invested in, and this led to someone at Ocean Spray deciding to try to sell a cranberry cocktail. This eventually became the cranberry juice that we can find in all stores today. Now fast forward to present day, and cranberry production has increased by a whopping 7 times, and it's now a crop which is sold all year round. So, you may be wondering what I think the problem here is. Well, finding a use for excess inventory can start out great, but when it's not managed correctly, it runs the risk of creating more emissions in the end. In fact, let's look at oranges versus orange juice. PepsiCo recently did an analysis of the carbon footprint of their Tropicana brand OJ and found that the emissions breakdown looked like this. 60% was from growing the oranges, 22% was from transportation and distribution, 15% for the packaging, and the use and disposal was the final 3%. So, if we assume that the main thing added by turning the oranges into OJ is the packaging and half of the transportation, then that means that OJ has a carbon footprint which is 33% higher than just eating an orange normally. So, when we think back to that 7 times increase in cranberry production that I mentioned earlier, well, the increase in emissions was likely even higher since many of those new cranberries were being made into juice. So I gotta say, this rant by this agricultural lady is absolutely correct. Excess and ugly produce absolutely does get used to make these other things. But that's also why subscriptions like Imperfect Foods help us reduce our emissions due to food waste. If we as a society can get away from demanding specific foods during our weekly grocery trips, and instead we just say, give me 21 meals, then we can leave it up to the supply chain to decide what to give us based on what produce has the lowest emissions. They can focus on food which is about to go bad, is ugly, or has excess inventory at the time. Then, anything which is still left over can get used to make products like juice, jam, pie, whatever you want, and it can still go to use. We just might have to get used to eating oddball jam flavors from time to time. No more of that all grape all year stuff. And hey, I'm not saying that we can't enjoy food anymore. Heck, even just using a system like this for half of your grocery list can lead to benefits. Personally, getting my produce from Imperfect Foods freed up my time so that I could purchase my other staples through a different grocery store, which in turn led me to reducing my grocery bill from about $110 a week to $80 a week, all while still picking specific stuff that I wanted at least half the time. And maybe you're not ready to jump into a system like that. That's alright. You can just focus on buying what's on sale at the time, since most stores put stuff on sale when it's close to going bad or when they have excess inventory. That way, you can save money while, come on, help me out here. That's right, while saving the planet. If you're looking to help reduce waste on harvesting, then I would suggest joining a CSA. You'll likely not save money. In fact, you'll probably spend more. But that is probably the best way to reduce your emissions as much as possible because it helps farmers reduce how much land they need in order to remain profitable. And finally, gardening is a great way to eat low-emission food from time to time, but there is a large caveat. You need to be sure that you don't drastically increase your electricity, water, and fertilizer usage in order to do it. So make sure that you're growing crops which are appropriate for your climate. Now, besides those tips, I gotta be honest, I'm still learning in this area. So if you have tips for me, then put them down in the comments below. I would really like to read them. Well, if you managed to learn something, then don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch my next video. Now go make a difference today.